This episode is going to be a lot of fun. I've got Skylor here with me to talk about ankylosing spondylitis. I don't know his story yet. This is going to be a all new information for me, but he's telling me that he's had one of the most transformative years of his life. So I'd like to welcome you, Skylor, to the Paddison podcast.
Well, hi. Yeah, it is quite awesome to be here. I've been thinking about this for a little while, thinking I should email you just to see if I could do something like this. And it's a real honor to be here. Seriously, this is the coolest thing.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for finding a suitable background in your large house there in Missouri so that we can get something that's quite nice to look at for folks that are watching this on YouTube. We're going to have a chat about your story, your pains that showed up and what you did about it. We're probably going to chat for a while like we do on most of these episodes. So before we do that, give us like a little bit of just a snapshot of some of the results that you've achieved. Not a long version, just in 30 seconds or a minute.
All right. Well, to put it really, really shortly, I was to the point where some days I was totally bedridden. I really had a hard time walking. Even my SI joint was so inflamed, and it was really, really rough. Specifically so bad one day that my mom actually had to help me go to the bathroom, and but that gives you an idea. And now I'm able to, I was at the YMCA a couple days ago playing basketball with high schoolers that are, they're not going easy on me. And I might have been a little too hard for where I'm at right now, but I know that my body is in a place where I can recover from that now. I can run, jump, I can do anything I really want with pretty little limitation, and it's pretty awesome.
One of the inspirations for this you mentioned came from Cherie, which was a previous podcast guest. She was the first guest that I had on talking about ankylosing spondylitis. And she also inspired another guest who recently appeared on the show with the same condition. So we have a lot to say thank you for Cherie. And I did actually reach out to her recently. Her and I are still in somewhat regular contact, and thanked her yet again because these stories that we share on these platforms enable us to reach other people with similar diagnoses or similar symptoms. And they can then be inspired to make changes. And sometimes it's just that one thing that we learn or that one person we listen to can play a massive role. So hopefully you'll be able to be that person for some other people. And I'm sure that there'll be things that we talk about now that appeal or that help many other people. So let's go back. We're only talking about a year ago, wasn't it, that you said to me before we started that this all happened. Tell us, how did this go down?
Well, it really first started whenever I was in high school. I was 17 years old, and I'm only 21 now, by the way. So it's only been about 4 years, little less than 4 years. But it was April. I remember very specifically because it was just a couple days after prom. And I woke up one morning, specifically after a really, really hard workout the day before. I was always very into exercise, but we might talk more about that later. And I just had a little, what I would there's some type of tweak that happened in my back and my SI joint, my low back. And I just thought, that's not quite right. But, I'll just go to school anyway. So I went to school. Next day, I'm like, well, it doesn't feel any better. And this is very contrary to what I used to feel. Usually you work out a little too hard, which is what I thought it was. And then you feel better the next day. That didn't happen. Day after day after day, it didn't heal. Month after month, it got worse. And that was my junior year of high school. I can gloss over a lot of the details. That summer wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. It kept getting a little worse. And then that next year, whenever my senior year of high school started, I just got to say, oh man, it was the worst year of my high school when it was supposed to be this most exciting year. Yeah. Where a lot of cool things are happening. You're thinking about what you're going to do with your life. It was, I just got to say it was like hell. It was terrible. I'm just sitting I'm sitting for 7 hours a day and I'm thinking, when is this going to end? Because yeah. I have to go to the bathroom in rest period and stretch and by the end of the day, I would come home, and that's the only thing I could do is I'd just be like, I just need to lay down and let my spine decompress. Anyway, let's gloss over some more. That summer was really bad. I'm just going to give it to you. It wasn't good.
So freshman year. So let me just interrupt and clarify if it's all right.
Sure.
So it really did begin, let's say 3 to 4 years ago. The initial, the first year sounded like it was fairly light, but the second year sounded significant. Which of the years was it when it was the worst, or are we getting to that?
Oh, you're getting to it. Yeah, it was definitely. It was a gradual progression.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to college, and it wasn't far away from home. It was only about an hour, maybe a little over an hour from home. And my freshman year, I like to attribute it a little bit to the mental state I was in. It was very exciting. You're meeting a lot of new people. College is just fun in general. There's always something to do. And I was walking a lot, which was probably good. I mean, I'm sure that definitely helped a little bit. So that year wasn't totally unbearable, but it wasn't any better than my senior year, especially. I mean, it didn't get all that much worse. But my sophomore year, it just really compounded, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And by the way, I had taken all these summers leading up to it. It was like my mom and I's like goal in life was like, hey, we're going to figure out what this is. We're going to fix it, and we're going to do everything we can. And I had nothing stopping me. I would stop at nothing because, I mean, when you're in pain 24/7, you'll do just about anything. So it got to my sophomore year, and I'll just like gloss over details again. It got so bad eventually. I actually dropped out in October of last year because I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, because if I wanted to sleep, I would have to pop, painkillers, NSAIDs 2 or 3 times a night. I was really having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. Sometimes I'd have to have my roommate help me out of bed, and that was really embarrassing.
Yeah.
Sometimes couldn't even walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night if I had to go to the bathroom. It's just, I remember this will put it in perspective. I remember one specific time when I was on this amazingly beautiful trip. This was the summer before then, by the way, but this really encapsulates how terrible it was. It could take the best situation and make it just unbearable. We were on this picturesque journey to Colorado in the States, and it was with our church group, our youth group. And I was kind of like, featuring as a young adult leader. And anyway, I have had a lot of amazing experiences with that same trip. We go every year. And just that year specifically, it was this amazing thing that was supposed to be amazing, but it was the worst experience of my life because, we're always doing things. I was in such a bad way, and I couldn't show it because I didn't know how to articulate it to people. Mm. And there was specifically one night when I just broke down, and everybody saw it, and it was really embarrassing. It was after I had been in the shower, and I was shivering after, it kind of gets kind of cold after you're, drying off in the shower. And the pain was so bad just from shivering that I collapsed into a pile on the floor and was just crying that God would kill me slowly. I was in such a bad place. I was suicidal. So I figured by that time, later on in my sophomore year, I had to drop out. I couldn't do anything else. There was nothing I could do at college. I had served my time, if that makes any sense.
And so obviously, even with your best efforts, this would have distracted you from all of your studies and so forth. You probably weren't doing as well as what you did at school comparatively because you're in pain all the time. And was that the case? And what about socially?
Yeah, definitely academically, because I was mostly because I was missing a lot of class. I was having a hard time walking across campus, or in case of morning classes, especially getting out of bed. Socially, I want to say that surprisingly, I didn't suffer as much socially. And, Clint, what I really think it was a coping mechanism. I was trying to express something outwardly that I didn't feel inwardly, even in the slightest. And in some way, shape, or form, that kind of tricked me into, I say tricked in a light sense, but, it kind of tricked me into thinking that I had this kind of sense of peace when I didn't. And I never told people about this. I mean, they knew, Skylar's got I would always say a back injury, but I just don't know how long it's going to take to recover. And I have gotten tests, but I don't tell them about all the tests that come back negative, because then that leads to more questions, and I can't articulate the answers. So yeah, it did suffer academically, but surprisingly, I feel like I tried to compensate for that socially, and whether that was a good thing or bad thing, I don't really know, but it shows I was not in the greatest position.
Don't you think it's interesting how common it is? In fact, it's almost the default position to make up a variation of what the thing we're suffering from is when it's an autoimmune disease. It's
my gosh, yes.
What is that? I still haven't understood that. It's almost like the acknowledgement that you have an autoimmune disease is the modern day equivalent of having leprosy or something. Anything but let someone else know that it's that. See, with it, when it's cancer, and not to put any diminishing sort of commentary around how bad that is, but at least you get the support from loved ones, and everyone comes into your house holding a pink balloon and says, we're going to do a walk and raise money for you, and you can do this, and here's someone else who recovered from cancer, and you can do it, and come on, let's do it, and everyone's behind you, and it's almost, in a way, offset by positivity. But with an autoimmune disease, you're like, look, it's a back injury. It's not something that, look, it's fine. It's fine. Let's go party. And it's all done suffering in silence. And that's why you go to the dark places. Like you mentioned before, when you collapsed in the shower, the dark places I've been to are just shocking, because you just think, is this just something I'm going to live with in silence forever? And is there ever a way out of this? And it's so bad sometimes on your mental state, and no one gets it. And it's because it's your own body attacking yourself. You get into this cycle of fury and panic, and you got nowhere to go because it's all inside you, and it's you and you versus you. I mean, it's shocking, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Clint, I got to say, it is so awesome talking to somebody who understands it as well as you. I have, honestly, I have my mother, who was, I know we always talk about support. My mother was my support. My mother, because she went through somewhat similar problems. But I got to say, it is so cool watching you get enthusiastic about this, just like I do with people, only to see their eyes glaze over and they're like, what were you talking about again? It's so cool that I know you get it. And it's cool talking to you about that. Anyway, just a side comment. It was awesome.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So what I don't like to do in any kind of platform is spend too long on the misery. So what we've done, we've really established that you've had a lot of challenges here, and that you really were in this desperate state. I mean, it couldn't have got more desperate, really. Struggling to get out of bed, especially your mental state was in the worst. You don't want to go beyond that. So let's now transition. What I'm curious is, what did you try to do to help this before you came across the stuff that I share? Because the stuff that I share, most of my listeners know what that is. So we can go through, some of the ways in which you implemented that, and we can learn from you and the variations of that you did. But first of all, what didn't work that you were trying during these years?
Well, probably just about everything. I glazed over those details, but man, whenever I think anybody who's struggling, who might be watching this, you really will try anything, and you'll throw lots of money at the issue. And we did try a lot of things. We had a lot of x-rays. We looked at a lot of different procedures. Didn't seem like they would actually help. Spine surgery was coming up next on the list, which we were thinking, which I'm so glad we didn't go down that route, because the benefit rate, not many people really benefit from that, especially people with like chronic degenerative spine diseases like ankylosing spondylitis or any type of arthritis. People don't really benefit all that much from it. So yeah, we had tried, right before finding your program, we were like doing this. I was all out, because I had came home and 100% of my energy was devoted to researching this. It was kind of like how you got for a couple months, and you just try everything. And, procedures, go to however many doctors, however many chiropractors, you throw more pills. There was one time I was taking like 30 different pills a day. And, some of them were like most of them were like herb supplements or like 5-HTP or B12 or N-acetylcysteine or, whatever, fill in the blank. I'm taking, or fish oil. I'm taking so many pills, and I'm thinking, even if my mindset was, and I mean, it's so benign and it's weird looking back at it now because it's dumb now and then I look back on it. But I was thinking, even if only one of these works, I gotta feel something, but I didn't. And sometimes when I maybe felt just a tiny bit better the next day, I'm thinking, what was it? What was it? And I wasn't thinking, it just could have been up to random chance. It's just tiny fluctuation. And that might have been attributed to my mental state where I was just looking so desperately for whenever I felt better. But I just couldn't find really anything. Yeah. It was
totally.
You tried everything.
Mate, total overlap with my experience and my journey through that. I put up a slide when I'm giving my keynote presentation to show the stuff that I took over the years. And on the slide, there are 50 odd something things. And what's most interesting is that when I created that slide, I did it off the top of my head. So I listed
Wow.
50 odd things that I could remember that I took and put them onto one slide. And those ones that you mentioned everything you mentioned was on my list as well. And a whole lot more. And so, we get to a point where, we're basically taking everything that we've ever heard a positive review online. Just if one person said, oh, that helped me, we add that to the mix. And then when we do wake up in the morning, we do think something may have shifted. You've got 50, 30, in your case, 30 variables. How do you know which of one of these 30 is doing anything? And in fact, put all those together and the body's so confused, it probably can't even possibly make an improvement forward. So, okay, what were doctors saying before we talk about now, the implementation of our program and how that went? Talk us through what doctors were telling you. Obviously, surgery was raised. What about medications?
Medications, usually just non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. That's pretty much that was until the very end when we actually got the technical diagnosis. I never really took the diagnosis, but he kind of, the rheumatologist pretty much gave it to me. But yeah, it was always, whenever I went to a doctor, the consensus was pretty much just like, yeah, you're a healthy, looking very vitally, vivacious.
Vitality.
You're looking great. You had a lot of vitality. Yeah. And 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid. And, if you have any pain, just take an ibuprofen or a Tylenol. And I did. I took them like mad because I had to. I couldn't get through the day. Sometimes I couldn't get out of bed or sleep if I didn't. And it was, it's frustrating. And at the very end, we did get with my rheumatologist, the appointment, it was about a year ago. Whenever he gave me that diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis, he actually prescribed me a pretty heavy dose straight onto Humira. Didn't even mess around with methotrexate or prednisone or anything like that. And I didn't really know at the time. I had known a little bit about those drugs, and I knew Humira was definitely like on the higher end of usually what they move people up towards. And the fact that he was wanting to give me a pretty high dose, my mom is pretty sure about this, and I think she's right now that I think about it, is that he's thinking, his thought process was, man, this guy's so young. He's got his whole life ahead of him. Why don't we just kick this thing out of the park right now? Shoot at it as hard and as fast as we can, unload as many rounds of ammo at it as we can. So maybe that was his thought process. Maybe, I don't know. But I never actually took the drugs is the crazy part. I'm so glad I didn't, but man, was it rough. Man, I feel like most people would have. People would have.
The approach of trying to smash it or throw all the ammo at it, as you said, is actually the non-scientific description of what they actually want to do in every case. So the approach for treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, according to my rheumatologist, who explained this to me in no uncertain terms, we want to treat it aggressively to get it under control as quickly as possible. That is the approach, okay? So, in that sense, your rheumatologist was suggesting something in line with those recommendations. But let's not shy away from the fact that methotrexate and all these other disease-modifying drugs, they're pretty heavy ammunition as well. So
Yeah.
he's just bypassed those ones and gone for that. Well, anyway, you didn't take that. So tell us what you did. Tell us about give me your healing journey. Tell us what happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's kind of hard to totally start. Well, I know exactly an instigating incident because I was learning a whole lot up through the years because I was researching a lot, and especially once I came home and dropped out of college, I was researching a ton. But the one incident that really just set it off for me is actually very similar. What happened to you, oddly enough, is my mom one morning. I had tried tons and tons and tons of like diet modifications, but never a total, workaround. It was just take this group out to put this thing in. And at that time I was doing a lot of green smoothies, a lot of supplements. And I was actually doing kind of keto at the time. I was doing the ketogenic diet, and I actually did see improvements on the ketogenic diet, surprisingly, but nothing like what I've seen here. Anyway, so my mom suggested me, you're not getting where you want. She just threw the idea out there, just like we threw it. So many ideas out there. She said, why don't you try a juice fast? Why don't you try a juice cleanse? Mm-hmm. And which I had no idea about your program at this time. And I said, all right, let's try it. I do anything. I don't care if not eating was the only thing I hadn't done. Gave, and it was like, I woke up on day 2 and I was like, I'm almost at like, I want to say a 40% pain reduction almost overnight. Yeah. And then I was like, all right, I'm going another day with this. I don't care if I don't get to eat. I feel good, So I went another day and I was like 50%. I felt 50% better in like 2 days. And if that didn't solidify the belief that, okay, something is happening in the digestive system along there, something is happening. And there is a problem whenever I consume things. Yeah. And I was on this track because that was like the first clue that the detective picks up. And this is probably 3 months before I got your program, 2, maybe even 2. But I had followed that rabbit trail down, and I was coming across, I feel like, it would have taken me years, just like it took you years. It would have taken me so long to figure out all the information that you present in your program so well and just well laid out. I probably would have figured it all out eventually, maybe. I don't really know, but gosh, Clint, it would have taken me so long. And to have access to a program like yours that just lays it out cut and dry, clear as day, here's what you got to do. And that's pretty much it. That's so useful. So yeah, after that, I had been down the rabbit trail and I found Cherie, that the one interview that you had done with her. And that was kind of the thing that made me say, all right, so a lot of the things this guy is saying by the interview, it's pretty in line with what I'm going for. And why don't I just follow this trail a little bit farther, pay an extra $50. It's the cheapest treatment I've ever played. It's $50 is the cheapest treatment I ever paid for, and that's what I got out of it. Yeah. So I had to follow the rabbit trail, but it led me to a good place.
Oh, that is a fun story to listen to for me, especially because there's so many parallels with, the fasting and finding the relief immediately and making the absolute solid deduction from that it has to be the digestive system. And for me, that was it. I was certain there was no one could tell me that it wasn't the digestive system. And that's when I experienced the deepest, most profound sense of hope. Because I've learned from doing physics at university, if you can influence something, then you can gain some control over it. All right. And so if we can influence the digestive system by fasting, we can gain some control over it. All we needed to work out was, well, what can we eat to get the same result as what we get when we're fasting? And that became a multi-year experimental journey. But when you started our program, first of all, it's written for rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm sure there was a little bit of friction with that because of the titles of our different conditions. But I'm sure that you were able to see past that and just follow the process. How did it play out? And did you go full tilt, or did you do half? And how were the results?
Well, yeah, there was a little bit of friction that I thought, okay, well, I have ankylosing spondylitis, so I probably wouldn't have thought much of it if I heard, if it's just rheumatoid arthritis. But then I saw Cherie's story, and actually I saw the recent podcast you did with Judith. And by the way, if Judith is watching, she said she watches all your podcasts. So hi, Judith. I loved watching your podcast. It was really entertaining. Anyway, where was I? I was saying.
So you started the program. Yeah.
Yes, started the program. So I had started, and it was full on. I mean, I jumped into this as I was like, I'm going to be 100% compliant because if this works, I want to know. Because I had known, oh man, this is really in line with what I'm already finding. Let's just give it a try. And I had tried, things that are just about as hard as the program already. At that time, I was, like I said, it was right before I found your program. I was doing kind of ketogenic, and that was not working out so well long term. Partially because I was actually losing too much weight.
Yeah. Now,
so
can I jump in there? I heard some good commentary around this from Dr. Neil Barnard, who you may be familiar with if you've spent enough time.
So familiar.
Okay. So for those who,
I am,
big fan. Yeah. So those who don't know Dr. Neil Barnard, he started a charity in the United States called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It's an enormous operation, and they run clinical trials. He's published so much work for the public through his publications that are available on Amazon, books and so forth, Kindles. But he also has published a lot for the medical community through scientific journal papers. And he's one of the pioneering experts on type 2 diabetes. And he's also an authority across so many other medical conditions using a plant-based diet, low-fat plant-based diet. So we had the benefit of having him speak at a conference in Melbourne, which I hosted just the other day. And I got to listen to him talk. In fact, I sat next to him at dinner, and we had a great conversation about rheumatoid arthritis. I can talk about it at another time. But what I gleaned from him when he fielded a question about the ketogenic diet, he said most of the benefits that you feel symptomatically from a ketogenic diet once you begin is because of a sudden caloric drop. So you're actually not eating as much calories once you remove all the other sources of calories from your diet. And it's difficult to hit all of the calories that you need when you're only eating this small portion of food group. So that was his comment around it. He then alluded to much more to be said on this topic, but during a Q&A and you've got 25, 30 people with their hands up, that was his first response. He'd also just covered an entire hour presentation why high-fat animal foods are bad for you, so it was pointless to then reiterate all of that again. But basically to say that's why we can feel some symptomatic relief when we shift to a ketogenic diet. But let's also add to that, if you're coming from a classic American or Australian, New Zealand, European diet, what you're doing is you've got all of these high-fat foods, oily foods, junk foods, processed foods, and then you're shifting across to a diet that, whilst it has its limitations, is a cleaner. It's actually like foods that the body at least would be familiar with, and not all this junk food and all this saturated stuff that's coming in. At least your diet suddenly got cleaner and simpler. And if you add to that less total calorie intake, then you're going to feel better for a while. But is it a healthy diet for long-term human health? It certainly is not. But sometimes all we need to see is a sudden improvement. And people can stick to this stuff for years thinking that because they got that initial improvement, it's the right diet for them. Thankfully, you didn't fall into that trap and stay with it for a long time.
Yes.
But I did interrupt you just to make that comment, because I think a lot of people field questions from their friends and have family members say, what about this keto diet? Or what about this paleo diet and stuff? And again, whilst benefits can be observed short term, it's the long-term impact that's worrying.
Yeah. I got to say, when you talked about Dr. Barnard, just a side note, health, fitness, and lifestyle intervention, as well as stress management and, spiritual growth. All these types of things, just health as a general thing, has always been an interest of mine. That's why I said I was very into exercise and, eating clean before then. And I thought I was eating clean. But I got to say now, Clint, seriously, this is such a part of my life. I spend so much, like, ridiculous amounts of time just like scrolling through medical journals, like trying to find like interesting stuff, reading Dr. Barnard's studies on type 2 diabetes. I have become like, my dad calls me doctor sometimes. So does my grandfather. They'll ask me questions. They say, so what do I want to do if I have this, doctor? I know what you mean. I feel like I kind of have the same type of brain as you. I love listening to information. All these guys, Garth Davis, Michael Greger, Michael Clapper, Dean Ornish. When you called me, I was actually just listening to the Rich Roll podcast, which if somebody knows Rich Roll, awesome guy too, in the plant-based movement. I was listening to him interview Dean Ornish and Ann Ornish on his podcast online. You can find that on YouTube. It's awesome. I'm only about halfway through it. Anyway, that's besides the point. I just got to say, this is a big part of my life. And when you said, oh, Dr. Barnard, oh yeah, I know Dr. Barnard. I would love to meet people like that too.
Yeah. Very, very humble guy. Happy to listen rather than talk. We're over a dinner table, which I think is a sign of people who are wise. If you're the one yapping away all the time, you're not learning, are you? I find that if you're the one doing all the talking, then, when I do a lot of talking on this podcast, I do so because people have often commented under YouTube videos or have emailed me and says, I like on the podcast when you share your own experience or try and teach us something as we're also listening to the guest. And so that's what I deliberately do if I feel I can contribute something that I've observed in amongst my support group, where I interact and coach people really closely and learn a lot about their situation and how to help them, or whether or not it's just from emails or from conversations like that. So yeah, I mean, the community is fantastic. We have got such great celebrity doctors, great celebrity fitness and sports people within the plant-based movement, that it is a movement that's exciting, and it's something that is only just beginning. So someone like yourself, you can set up an Instagram page, you can post images of yourself and talk about, how you're training and what you do to reduce or keep at a minimum your SI joint pain, post pictures of the foods that you eat, the people who you're influencing, inspirational quotes, all this sort of stuff. And you can gain a large following of people who are inspired, who support what you're doing. And it's fun and it's exciting and it's changing the landscape of the way we eat, and it's saving the planet. And you feel good about the fact that no animals are suffering as a result of us being on the earth, at least in that capacity, in the eating capacity. So, good for you. Get into it. You also got to, as you said, you're young and vibrant and have great vitality, and also you look good and you've got a great story. So keep it going beyond this conversation. Really turn
I will.
Yeah. Use this as a platform, and one of many that you can build a following, because I'm sure a lot of people want to continue to see how this goes. So you and I both have a tendency to chat. So let's move it on. Let's get through.
Yeah.
I want to hear how the program went, and I specifically want you to share tips on things that you learned, that you emphasized part of the program, whether it be the smoothies or the exercise or stretching, whatever it might be, implementable tips for other people. So let's get to that in a second. First of all, take us through the pain reduction that you experienced when you started implementing this process.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously in the beginning, I knew I was going to do well on a juice fast because I had experienced that before. So the juice fast wasn't really that hard. Maybe because, I don't think it's because I'm a super disciplined person. I think it's just because I was used to trying really hard things and ridiculous things at that time. So it wasn't too hard for me specifically, but I understand if that is really, really difficult for most people. But it was actually, maybe I shouldn't say it wasn't difficult readapting to the foods, because it was slightly. But I think with the way I was already eating, it wasn't super hard because I was somewhat restrictive by nature anyway, because I was trying to do healthy eating. And, let me actually say, I don't like using the word restrictive. If people say, oh, you have a really restrictive diet now, don't you? I say, no, I don't have a restrictive diet. I just have a real diet because I'm just eating real food. I'm not eating fake food that we make or that we kill for our own, was unnecessarily, so anyway,
let me comment on that as well, if you don't mind, because I have something that's really was a big turning point for me with my journey. There's a doctor, a gastroenterologist called Dr. Hiromi Shinya, who I've mentioned several times. I mentioned him in my book. So he wrote the enzyme factor. It's in a box here. We've moved so many times, I don't know where the book is, but he's got the enzyme factor and the microbe factor. When I read the enzyme factor, what really changed my views on food profoundly was that this is a gastroenterologist in his 70s, and he built his diet around watching what people eat and what their colons look like. I mean, it's a fascinating way to develop your own eating habits, right? And his diet primarily consisted of a mixture, like the 2-grain or the 3-grain mix in our program, of buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, millet, and brown rice. Okay? Now, I tried all of those, and recent version of our program have omitted the amaranth because it's just a pain in the ass and gets in the cracks on the tiles and everything. So I've sort of taken out the amaranth, and I've postponed the brown rice because I found it a difficult reintroduction. So hence we're left with millet, buckwheat, and quinoa. Well, I don't like millet, so I took millet out, and that's where the 2-grain mix came from. That's where buckwheat and quinoa came from. And they were the first foods I was able to eat after doing raw foods for 8 months. And so first cooked foods I was able to eat. Now, he ate the same thing, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He eats the same food every meal: buckwheat, quinoa, millet, brown rice, amaranth, same thing over and over again. And he obviously eats some other snacks like some fruits and vegetables and green leaves. But the bulk of his calories and his nutrients come from these simple meals that are repeated over and over again. And he even talks about in his book, he loves sushi. He's Japanese, and he says sometimes, very occasionally as a special treat, I'll have it. But I know it's not for health purposes. It's just that I just feel like it sometimes. But for health benefits, that's what he eats. So it's not a celebration of food. It's using food as a purposeful medicine.
Yeah, I got it. You're right.
I found like that was huge. That was huge. I'm like, okay, look, you don't have to eat thousands of different things. You just eat the healthiest stuff as much as possible, and you have the healthiest possible body.
Yeah. And hey, even if we really wanted to, there are so many thousands of varieties of plants on the planet. You could try a new variety of banana every day for the next year and not even be here half or maybe even a tenth of them. I mean, there's so many bananas, but we only eat one type. Yeah. But whereas with with meat, there is like beef, pork, chicken. And then if you're going to count other animal products, there's like eggs, milk, and really that's all dairy products. There's like 5, maybe 6 or 7 things that we just we eat a disproportionately large amount of our calories from those things. Yep. And then we say, oh, it's not a meal if it doesn't have beef. It's like, well, I have much more variety if I'm looking for plant-based options. If I want to, I have so many. I feel less restricted now than I ever have. Wow, and by the way, I got just a side note. I sort of had I didn't sort of have. Growing up, I had a lot of body image dysmorphia. I really did. And my family will really relate with that. And I got to say, through this restrictive, put that in quotes, way of eating, I have basically cured my body image dysmorphia. I mean, it was so bad. I was like, but growing up, I never went to the pool because I would not take my shirt off in front of people. And now, I went to the pool this last summer. I looked better than I ever have. I felt better than I ever have. And I was proud to show it. And I loved it. And it was the most enjoyable experience.
That's awesome. That is just absolutely fantastic. That's one of those unexpected benefits that you just don't even imagine could happen from doing something like this. Well
Yeah.
done. So cool. Okay, let's keep things moving because I want to respect people's time who might be listening and try and keep it moving along. So let's talk about symptomatic reductions and how you did
Okay.
it.
Well, yeah, once I got onto kind of the baseline foods, I think it seems like this is a somewhat common thing with people that follow your program. I stuck with those for a long time.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't as hard as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I stuck with them probably for, man, 2, maybe even 3 months actually, just because you're feeling good. You don't want to. You talk about it in your book. If you're in the healing groove, you don't want to get out of that.
That's it.
I've had hiccups. I've had times where I get out of that healing groove and I get down. I'm like, man, why am I feeling this way? One of those was actually just like last week. I was kind of down, out of the healing groove, and I've jumped right back into it. Kind of did a little reset. Jump back. I'm actually like on the baseline meals right now. And it's amazing how it just works. It just works.
It just works.
Yeah. So whenever I went through that, I did it for a long time. And whenever I started reintroducing foods, it didn't seem like I had any real problems, with the exception of like citrus. It seemed like large amounts of citrus didn't go super well, specifically lemons. Now, I didn't try it more than once, so it's not like I could guinea pig myself again and see if that's. But remember, this was earlier on. This was one of the first foods I reintroduced. So who knows how much my intestinal environment has repaired and gotten even better since then. So who knows? I very well could tolerate lemon now. I would almost bet you I probably could. But besides what
order of food did you go roughly? I know it's impossible to remember, but I mean, even if you sort of give me an idea around whether it was some fruits or whether it was just some very low starchy veggies, or do you remember? Can you give me just a rough idea of what reintroduction order you had?
Yeah, I can. So I remember specifically the first one was zucchini, and then it was and that was awesome. It was like, wow, this is something different. But it wasn't, it wasn't this life-changing thing. I was like, wow, I'm eating something different after like 3 months.
Yeah.
And all I did was like shred it onto my salad as kind of like made it so a little more moist.
Yeah.
And anybody, by the way, little tip on the Paddison program is whenever Clint says giant salads, I took that to heart. And seriously, my salad bowls are like twice the size of my head. It's huge. And I love it now. I love it.
Mate, you look so healthy. Something's working because you look extremely healthy. I don't know what you used to look like in the past, but like the moment I saw you, I'm like, this is a young, very healthy looking, handsome man. That's the first thing I thought. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I've had, it's very weird to get this as a 21-year-old, but just people who haven't seen me in a couple months, maybe more like 8 months or so, they say, "Oh my gosh, your skin looks great." And I'm like, "Really? It
your
does."
Your skin looks amazing.
And I know I probably have terrible lighting in here or something, and it's definitely not the best camera angle. But I sometimes I don't feel like many people have this, and I don't want people to think this is a pride thing. I want them to think that this is more of a just like I'm happy with the way I am kind of thing. Is I'll sometimes wake up in the morning and I'll look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, this doesn't happen all the time, but I'm like, dang, I got things going for me. And I just like,
love it.
I'm like, it's weird because before then, I mean, I might have said that a little bit, but now it's like, wow, I don't stink as much. That's another benefit is, once I eliminated dairy, I noticed that I don't stink as much when I sweat. My skin is better. My skin was never terrible, but now it's like, I have no skin problem. I mean, if I ever have a pimple, it's like one and done, and it's like one day problem, and it's never sticking around.
Yeah.
So thank you for noticing that. Other people have too, and it's really awesome. It's really awesome.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons you can look at yourself and say, dang, I have things going on. And I think that that's good, and that all of us should look for ways to compliment ourselves and to have the highest self-esteem possible. Because why not? I mean, if society thinks that that's facetious or whatever, then society's destined to fail, because we need to look at ourselves and love ourselves and look in the mirror and not look for the things that are wrong in our face, but the things that exist behind the eyes. It's us in there. There's a spirit. There's a spirit that is that is glowing and that wants to do great things and wants to be loved and wants to share love. And when you can look in your eyes and you can feel that for yourself, it's because not only have you got the physical external stuff that really is just the luck of the draw or the gene pool, and you can't take responsibility for that, nor can your parents. It's all really genetically unpredictable. But what you can project enormous love for yourself is that you're not accepting something that's an enormous inconvenience and problem in your life and then running with it with the victim mentality. You've turned that around and you've got something that you can reflect upon when you look in the mirror and say, I am a conqueror. I am a champion. I have taken information and I've applied it, and I've taken my own feedback and experience and modified this, and I have done something absolutely remarkable. And at your age, with the blessings of the physical appearance and what you've achieved, who gives a toss about the university, right? You can always re-enroll in the university. You can always get that education, which, by the way, was an important part of my life, and I highly recommend you consider whether or not it's right for you. But, as this achievement, it's like Anthony Robbins says, when you've conquered like your greatest fear, everything is surmountable. Everything after that becomes easy compared to this enormous challenge. So whether or not you've got 1% SI pain or whether or not you got 5, the point is you know how to control it. You know how to be on top of it. If you want 0, you go and take a day where you do a fast for a day. Big deal. The point is that you have really achieved something remarkable that most people don't achieve in their lifetime. And that is why we can look in the mirror and say, we are a strong, powerful, wonderful human being. So I think it comes from deep, deep within.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Amen, brother. Yeah. By the way, I thought I might point this out just in case anybody that is watching maybe has AS was wondering. I didn't just have SI pain. It had spread. It started in my SI joint, but it had spread all the way up my spine, and it actually seemed to be becoming more of an arthritic, like systematic problem, because I did get a little bit of problems in my shoulders and my knees as well. So it was spreading through my whole body. But it had spread primarily up just my whole spine up to the base of my head. But anyway, that's just besides the point. So just in case somebody's watching and they're thinking, just in case somebody is watching and they think, oh, well, this guy doesn't quite understand because he didn't have the progression. He didn't have it all the way up his spine like I did. I did. Trust me. I know that feeling of being completely bound and not being able to even twist even the tiniest bit or bend over or looking up. Like I know that feeling of being completely bound up by tightness and pain. So yeah, just in case anybody was wondering, or if they weren't wondering, or if they just no, that's just great. So they know. That's great.
That's great. One of my friends who has his own podcast in the business space, he says he tries to eliminate the "yeah, but" comment from when he's creating podcasts. You want to eliminate the "yeah, but" stuff because people watching this, they say, yeah, but exactly, he didn't have this, or yeah, but it's because he's young, or yeah, but it's because of whatever. So I'm glad you pointed that out, and you clearly had the full spectrum of the AS symptoms, which is really, really substantial. So can you tell me anything more about your reintroductions, before we talk about how you are now? And then I want to wrap up with some tips for people.
Sure, yeah. Reintroductions, I think, like I said, first one was definitely zucchini that I remember. And then I can't remember exactly what I did after that, but I can give you a general guideline of like the things that came first. Definitely the miso paste, what is it? It would have been lemon. And at that point, it was one of the first foods I reintroduced, which is maybe one of the reasons I reacted to it. So I think I could probably tolerate that now. Another one, let's see, like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. I didn't actually introduce fruits for a little while, surprisingly.
Yeah, I'm picking up on that. Yeah,
but I seem to tolerate fruits pretty darn well now. I mean, actually, if this gives you an idea, I tolerate fruits really, really well. Because we had just a couple weeks ago, this is when we started emailing. I was telling you we were going on vacation. We ended up going on a cruise out of Florida in that area, which is why I thought it was cool, because I heard you were in Florida at that time. I'm like, wow, we're in the same state. Anyway, so while we were on that cruise, I was thinking, okay, how am I going to substantially get some like those baseline meals? So at dinner, I really, really had to harp the waiters about like, no oil, please. And it took them till the last night to actually get the orders right. And I, lots of the time, had to rely on just the fruit that was on the upper deck. It's always available, you know?
Yep.
So I was like, you know, people looking at me like I'm absolutely crazy. I have this big plate of cantaloupe, like 6 bananas, 3 pears, and that's my breakfast. And I'm just like, and people look at me like and they had some oatmeal too. So I had some oatmeal, and they just look at me like I am this monster. And I'm like, why? This is amazing. I love eating this way. And it was the coolest thing. So I noticed that after that week, I didn't feel as good. That's probably what led to me wanting to go back on this reboot, is because I was relying so heavily on fruit. Not saying anything's wrong with fruit, but something might be wrong with fruit for you if you have the intestinal environment that has been so impaired through your lifestyle choices. So maybe just don't eat fruit for like 80% of your calories like I did just for that 1 week. But my point is, I can tolerate them that well. But after I'd kind of gone through the non-starchy vegetables, I went into like potatoes, and then I did some berries like strawberries and blueberries and banana. So yeah, that was probably first couple foods I went with.
That's fantastic. And what about some of the more challenging, more heavier sort of starcher stuff? You mentioned potatoes. That's sensational, because what we look for, if people are listening for this, you're looking for foods that are highly convenient, that provide you with a great range of nutrition, but also that are able to provide you with energy. Because we don't want to be snacking on little bits and pieces all the time and trying to get by on things like the zucchini and like you know, yellow squash, which aren't going to give us any pain, but nor do they give us any energy. So we're not getting anywhere. But once we can get rice and potatoes and corn and even some oil-free sourdough breads or some, pasta, once we can get into that world, I mean, the world is good, because then we've always got something that's satiating and that also tastes nice. So were you able to get some of those foods in as well?
Yeah, I actually had pretty much really no noticeable problems with anything, but maybe if I ate a large amount of beans.
Okay.
And that's probably because of their higher protein content. Is, people with arthritic conditions generally don't their guts definitely don't favor the high protein environment. So I just kind of take it easy on the beans. And I think you talk about that a little bit in your program when you're combining maybe rice and beans together. Go a little easy on the beans if you want to try reintroduce them. But it was like anything that I introduced, it was never like night and day. Like I woke up the next day, I'm like, that's a no-no. I never had that. Right. Never had that, which is awesome. Yes. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So that was a little more subtle. It was like, I think that's not quite as good as how I felt the day before.
Yeah, it's subtle. So I can't say anything definitively about, okay, maybe I don't do as well with large amounts of beans. Who knows? Maybe I would. But, I don't think that, beans are amazing, but I kind of like rice just as much. So I figure if I just mix an equal portion of rice and beans together, I get the health benefits of both, and I'm not missing out on anything.
Excellent. And of course, rice and beans is one of those staples that if you go throughout South America, at least traditionally, if we rewind the clock maybe 50 plus years, that's all everyone eats, just beans and rice. Melissa used to go to Costa Rica sometimes, or she'd go to, and she also opened was part of an opening for a restaurant chain in Hawaii. And she's like, whenever you see the surfers were coming out and they're always just eating beans and rice. So, it's just such a staple, isn't it? It's a complete, delicious, great little combination, and very, very hearty. So let's wrap up by giving some tips. Are there some things that you emphasized? I noted one time you mentioned here about the large amount of leafy greens. Clearly that is a success path for everybody. There can be nothing sure in life. Taxes, death, and leafy greens will make you feel better. So anything beyond that? Was there, like, did you favor baby spinach over the others, or did you like this? And then anything else that comes to mind? I want you to talk about maybe some exercise. Anything else you can think of?
Well, yeah. So obviously, yeah, get as many leafy greens as you can. I mean, that's like, I saw you hammered that throughout the program. I'm like, all right, I'm going to hammer this like nobody else is going to hammer this, because my mom saw it and she's like, my mom is a very healthy person, always kind of has been, at least for as long as I've known her. And she was like, oh my Lord, Skylor, are you going to eat all? Yeah, you can't. And I'm like, watch me. I will. It'll probably take me an hour and 10 minutes, but I will. Anyway, more tips. One thing that I found that helps me a lot, and you talk about this, is actually biking. I actually didn't do stationary biking. I love being outdoors as much as possible and riding my bike around. If it gives you any idea, if anybody is in the Midwestern United States right now, you know how it is right now. It's cold, it's snowy, but hey, the roads got cleared off today and it was exposed concrete. I'm out riding my bike for at least 20 minutes. I'm just trying, because I like doing it, and it helps me, makes me feel better. I'm sure it has to do something with the movement of the hips and the SI joint. Probably something like that. I mean, I'm sure that's definitely, and it's just exercise overall. So finding something, it just so happened to be that biking really, really helped me. I know you talk about Bikram yoga a lot. I could never find a Bikram. I wanted to so bad. I could never find a Bikram yoga close to me. So, but I did do, I do yoga very frequently. Probably, I mean, pretty much, it's like almost like a religious practice, like 20 minutes every morning at least. Not literally religious, but I very often do yoga right when I wake up in the morning. I don't know if it had anything to do with my success. I kind of just really like doing my exercise, at least some of it, in the morning, right when I wake up.
I'm the same. I do exactly the same thing. I have a sequence of stretches that I do, and sometimes I don't get through them all. Sometimes I just do a couple, but certainly a hip hinge forward bend is the first thing that I do every day. So like when you're about to do a deadlift at the gym, so your pelvis gets tilted forward, give the hip hinge, and then I reach down. I just slide my fingertips down my ankles, and it just hits the spot every morning. And then I just do that, and then I have another little weird one that's a funny looking thing, which is like almost like a legs far apart, toes pointing opposite direction, just opens up the hips. And then I sort of do a very wide-legged semi-squat. These two things just seem to help my particular restrictions open up a lot every morning. I feel good after doing that. So funny, we come back to Dr. Shinya again. Shinya does the same thing. He wakes up every morning and he says he gets his stretches out of the way. Now, he's 70, right? So, by then you'd expect to have a few things that are a bit stiff and stuff. But I think it's good practice. What does the cat do when it wakes up in the morning? You see a big stretch, and I watch my kids, right? My kids being the most pure version of a human that's had no influence of how we should behave every morning when we get up. They just wake up, and I see my 2-year-old, and she's like, oh, you know what I mean? She's stretching like that. It's normal, isn't it? It's the right thing. We should get that stretches going through the body in the morning. And sometimes we get out of bed and we get straight into our morning routine without doing it. And I don't think that helps.
Yeah. So if there is one way I could make that into like a technical tip, is you probably talk about this in your program, I just might not be able to remember it. Find exercise that really works for you. You might have to experiment a lot. I mean, it just so happened that bike riding was something that I already really enjoyed doing. And it just so happened to help me a lot, which was great. It's very convenient. I love going on, 30-minute hour bike rides every single day, even after my morning exercise. Usually my morning exercise, especially in the winter, like now, is usually just in my bedroom. And I just tell myself every morning, if I'm not feeling good in this place, do something. Yeah. Do something. And that's another tip is, don't tell yourself, I don't feel good enough. Do something. Just like, say my neck isn't feeling so good one day. Do something that is just involving my legs. Try some squats right in place. Just get blood flowing. And I tell myself when I'm not feeling it, just got to do something. Just do something. That's it. That might be something that really helps somebody. You know, I don't know.
I love it. That's Skylor's version of the Nike "just do it," but you're just do something. It's so true. It's so true. I used to ask the question, what can I do right now to help this situation? And then when it was done, I would say, what else can I do right now to help the situation? So it became this never-ending loop of what can I do right now to help this situation? So whilst we keep asking these questions, we get the answers. It's a better question than what's my future going to look like? Or how am I going to deal with this today? Or, what did I do to deserve this? Because you'll get answers. The brain will give you answers to any question. And if we ask the right question, we get better answers. We get answers that empower us. So these are good tips. Is there anything else you can think of? And I'm sure you'll think of about 20 once we jump off the recording.
Yeah.
But just to stimulate some creative juice here, what about with regards to did you snack? Do you snack a lot, or do you eat a lot at each meal?
I don't tend to snack as much. I don't know if that's if that's really a thing that a lot of people. I know it's a thing that a lot of people do, but I don't know if it's preferred for your program. I know it shows on your program, eat 3 times a day. Just seems to be kind of what I do. I find that if I try to snack a lot, it just ends up eating up a lot of my day. Yeah. It's like, I spent like 3 hours in the kitchen today. It's like, I know I'm not going to get, have fun trying to get fat on the Paddison program because you're not going to, I look better and feel better. And I was already a pretty decent shape, but I look better now than I ever have. And so anyway, you're not going to get fat by that, but just about 2, sometimes 2, usually 3 meals a day. I try to move more towards 3 meals a day because I find if I do 2 meals a day, I end up trying to stuff myself a little too much.
Yeah.
But my meals are big. People see me eat my meals, even if it's 3 meals a day. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to eat all of that?" I'm like, yeah, you want a slim figure, eat plant-based, and eat as much as you want all the time, whenever. And it's true. It just works.
Exactly. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Have you got any things like an air fryer or a rice cooker? Or have you got any of the tools that have helped you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I don't have an air fryer. I've really thought about just, just saving up and getting one. They're not all that much, but I didn't really have a need for one, so I just didn't end up getting it. If it's a need for you and it's something you really want, I think you should. Anyway, maybe I'll end up caving one of these days. But Instant Pot that's a big thing. I don't know if that's a big thing in Australia, is it?
It is not, but one of our very popular support group members, Ellen, she's always putting up content about her Instant Pot. I mean, she loves it. So do your family have one?
Yeah, it's just as helpful as, I don't know how to really tell. I mean, if you don't have an Instant Pot, just go buy one. It's worth it. It's really worth it for anything you want to do. I mean, it cooks that staple, 2 or 3 grain blend. It cooks it in about 30 minutes or something. It's fantastic. So some days, like usually I'll end up finishing it that night. I'll wake up a little, 5 minutes earlier in the morning, put it in the Instant Pot, go do my exercise. And then it's already well and done by the time I'm done with my exercise. So Instant Pot, awesome thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if there's one last tip, I don't think we've touched too much on like the mental part of healing, but that was a huge part of me too. I know we probably don't have much time to go into it, but
no, you go
really,
for it. We'll make this our last topic.
Okay. So really the importance of keeping yourself, if you notice every time you start going down, spiraling down, and you start telling yourself, I feel worse. What am I going to do about this? You'll notice that every time you do that, if you continue to do that, you won't feel better the next day. But the days that you tell yourself, I'm going to do something about, like you said, how am I going to do something right now to make this situation a little better? And then afterwards, do it again. When you start to have that mindset and you say, this worked for me once, I can do it again. I have setbacks every here and there. Whenever I have that mindset, things tend to get better. And I think that pretty much universal for everybody. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. You know? And some of that comes from, you can't have it all from within yourself. It also comes from other people. And specifically me, I don't have a lot of people my age. I live in a very small town in mid-Missouri. So my support during the Paddison program was like, seriously, oh my gosh, my mother is a godsend. She was the support, the person that kept me going, that I could tell all my feelings to, how this is going. She was the person that I talked to, and she's still, my mom is like my best friend. Nothing against my dad. It's just like, sometimes my dad and I can't quite relate like my mother and I do, partially because my mom and I have this connection through this experience. She was the one who was with me at my darkest hour, because she was the one who kind of knew how to deal with me with that. Because she was, we can't go into detail, but she had a similar experience early on in her life, not with an autoimmune condition, but with some unknown kind of pain thing, fibromyalgia-like stuff. So she kind of could relate with me. So she was there with me in my darkest hour. And also now in my, one of my triumphs. So now we're like best friends through that. And we always were kind of best friends, very kind of a mama's boy, which I'm proud of. I'm proud to say I'm a mama's boy. So having the inward talk, the self-talk, that's really, really important. It's just as important as everything else. Because if your self-talk is bad, everything else is going to suffer. And same thing with your support. If you have no support, then your mental state is going to suffer. And then you have that same problem. And then the third thing I would say is some type of, you talk about just meditation, just some type of spiritual practice to bring you closer to what you feel is an actual purpose. Because if you don't have a greater search for, if you don't have a search for a greater purpose about what am I going to do after I do this, then everything is meaningless. If you have no intent for what am I going to do after I do this? Why do I even want to do any of this in the first place? If you have no intent, then life is meaningless. But it doesn't have to be. You talk about make healing a must. You talk about that. You talk about creating a really compelling future for yourself. If you can do that for yourself, you just have to make the compelling future for yourself greater than the pain that you feel right now. And I know that's really hard, but you just got to make small steps. It just works. That's one thing I say all the time. I'm like, it just works. Just try it,
Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely great. You really have a great familiarity with all the stuff that I've put out. So I'm really, really humbled to hear you sort of quote many of the things that I've put in the program and that I've pulled from other sources and that have worked for me. And something that you said was absolutely so true. And it's so subtle that it takes someone who's been really through the trenches with this to discover this and to know the power of this. And is what you said was with regards to if you're having a couple of days where you feel that spiral, it seems to perpetuate a negative outcome physically. And it's true that once you feel in that healing groove, once you develop this sense of, I'm winning, this is working, I'm getting there. And if you have a couple of days like that, as long as you don't go and eat the wrong thing and do something silly, you know that actually helps the progress, that helps the momentum. So, and that's a subtlety that is very, very interesting that you've observed that and you've been able to articulate that, because I don't think we've covered that with anyone else in any other episode. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. Okay, well, Skylor, thanks, man. This has been a fabulous discussion. And I've been really, really having a good time chatting to you. And I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sure that this has been great watching or listening for other people. So congratulations on how far you've come. I can see that that your passion for not just getting yourself better, but for this whole movement of plant-based nutrition for human health and the planet and for animals is something that you're very passionate about. So this will very likely not be the last time we cross paths. You should come to some conferences. There are plant-based conferences throughout the US. I'm not geographically tuned in to where Missouri is so much as regards to where these conferences are occurring, but I'm sure that everything is within a 3 or 4 hour plane ride for you. And there are conferences on the East, West Coast, in North Carolina and all over the place. You've got the plant-based nutrition for healthcare, or the acronym always gets me. But this one that's happening in this year in September. There's another one, and that one's in Oakland, which is up near San Francisco. That one's fantastic. And then there's one by Plant Stock, which is happening in North Carolina, and I think that one's in August. There's one by the one that Neil Bernard organizes, or his organization organizes. That one's in Washington, D.C., and that one's in July. Each one of these are absolutely sensational conferences. And with your personality, your passion, and your story, you should go to one of these conferences, and you will love the food. You'll love the presentations. You'll learn a ton. And most importantly, you meet people who are absolutely sensational, and you become friends, and you can keep the conversation going on social media later. And it's super cool. A super cool, what do you say? Like way to connect with other people that becomes really enjoyable. And some of the friends I've made at these conferences, I hold very close to my heart. Get out there, man. I would
love to go to something like that. I've had my eyes on a couple conferences like that. So yeah, if you're ever gonna be at one of those, I will make an effort to get to it, because heck, I would love to meet Mr. Paddison in person. That would be so cool.
Well, I spoke to the
well as others.
Yeah, it'd be great to meet you in person. As we're recording this will go to air at the end of February 2019. So for folks listening to this in the future, at the last conversation I had with the organizers of Plant Stock, I'm meant to be speaking at that event this year. That's the North Carolina event, and I would have otherwise not mentioned that because it's not confirmed. But no harm done in saying that is a penciled in thing. So if I find out that that's going ahead, I will make that public. And Dr. Bernard actually asked me to speak at his event in 2020. So that would be July 2020. And if anyone's in Hawaii, I'll be in July in 2020 as well, speaking on Oahu and also Maui. But I'm hoping to put a lot more dates together once we get stateside. We're going to be in the United States from August 2019, this year onwards. And once over there, I'm going to sort of, now with our third child, now nearly 7 months old, we're stopped with the kids. I can start to look towards more of this stuff. So we'll meet each other at a conference, whether I'm speaking at it or not.
Yeah, I'd love it. That'd be awesome. It'd be so cool.
Awesome. Anyway, thank you. Back to you. Thanks very much for sharing your story. Let's stay in contact. Looking forward to seeing you down the track in person, and just want to thank you for your time once again.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for yours. This is so cool. It's so awesome. To me, it's like it almost seems like a prophecy fulfilled this moment right here, even though I'm just sitting in my house. So yeah, thank you for your time. It's a real honor to be here. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Skylor.